Hi again. In these videos, I want to share my faith and my experiences I had along the way during my life. In the last video, I told you a little bit about my childhood, and in this video, I want to talk about what happened to me when I was about 28 years old. At that point, had I was separated from my husband, and I had a new boyfriend. He lived in Canada. He is was later became my husband. At that time, we were friends, and I visited him in Canada. And we had a conversation. We were together with a friend, and we had a conversation about politics and all the things which were going on in the world. And I didn't know much about any of this. It wasn't really my biggest interest. But I made a comment where I said, well, I don't believe that we will ever have a third world war. We already had two, and since people learn, I'm sure we're not going to have another war. My boyfriend then said to me, which is really surprising because he was not really a Christian, but he said to me, well, that's not what it says in the Bible. And I was like, what do you mean? He says, well, you can read it in Revelation, talks about Third World War. And I was really intrigued. And I'm like, well, where? Show me. And he said, well, yeah, just go in the room. There's a Bible. And I went there, and it was an English Bible. And my English wasn't very good at that time. So trying to read the book of Revelation in a language you hardly speak is a real challenge, to say the least. So I gave up, and after I went back to Germany, one of the first things I did was looking for a Bible in my mom's house. And I couldn't find one for a while, but eventually I did. And then I read the whole Revelation, which was very confusing for me. And yeah, I could see that there were definitely a lot of things going on, but I wasn't really much smarter after I read that. But it wouldn't let me go. I just couldn't forget about it, and I wanted to understand, and I wanted to know more about that. About 2 days later, I ended up in the hospital for some very small thing, but they wanted to keep me for 3 days to check me out. And on the second day, a good friend of mine came by to visit. He had heard that I had come back from Canada, and he heard I was in a hospital, so he wanted to see how I'm doing, and he brought me a book. He said, I just read this book, and it really made me think, and I'm sure you have time to read. And I took the book and chatted with him. I didn't check out what it was all about. And when he was gone, I looked at it, and what it was The Late Great Planet Earth from Hal Lindsey. Well, it was, if not the first, so it was definitely one of the very, very first books written about the biblical revelation. And it was so unbelievable because this guy had no idea that this was exactly what interested me. This was exactly what I wanted to know. And I obviously read the book like within a day. It was done, and now I started to understand a lot more. And while I would say today, no, not everything Hal Lindsey wrote is right, it gave me a very good overview about what the revelation is all about and what it means. And since then, I am absolutely fascinated by the book of Revelation, not only obviously in general in the Bible, and the fact that all over the Bible, it's all about what's going to happen in the end. And it doesn't matter if you take the book of Daniel or Zacharias or the book of Isaiah, And then obviously Jesus also himself talked about the end times. And then, of course, the book of Revelation itself. And now I understand so much more and have so much more insight, because it's been fascinating for me ever since. All over these years, I have been fascinated by it. There were times where I looked a lot less into it, and then were times when I started to look a lot more into it, and especially in the last few years it really had come back to me, and it was as God really wanted to make me look into it, because I had found out that there's so many people, and that includes a lot of pastors and religious leaders who don't want to have anything to do with it and are confused by it or feel uncomfortable about it. But I find it an incredibly important book, and every book has an ending, and it's fascinating for me to see how people don't seem to be willing, or a lot of people don't seem to be willing to look in the end of the Bible, or look at the fact that it's the story of mankind and our relationship with God, and why they wouldn't want to read the end of it. I find it especially relevant right now. Relevant. There you go. Relevant right now and the times we are living, because more and more and more things just seem to fall into place. It's pretty fascinating, I think. And I just felt like that God at one point in my life just took me and put my face right into it and made sure I would not lose it anymore, because it is important. So that's all for today. Just a little video. I will go back into this for sure, but that was the story about an incredible, well, everybody else would say coincidence. I don't call it coincidence, because with God there are no coincidences. Bye.